Hey, everybody, it's Jon Fleischman with SoDoesItMatter.com, and we have another Straight Talk interview for you. Actually, this is a repeat interviewee because I had Jennifer on the program before, but I've asked Jennifer Van Laar if she would join us again because there's been a lot of stuff going on with Gavin Newsom lately that is in her wheelhouse. Let me first start by saying that Jen and I have been friends for a long time, and she is the managing editor of RedState. And if you don't go to RedState, you should go to RedState. And you should not be intimidated if they ask you to join, because by the time you're done listening to this interview, you're going to be like, I want to contribute to what Jennifer is doing. And the more subscribers that RedState has, the more she can go to them and say, I need more resources for my research. So it's all tied together. So if you, and especially those of you that are watching this who are paid subscribers to what I do, subscribing to RedState is the equivalent way that you support what Jennifer does. So I don't want to make this into a big sales pitch, but I just wanted to emphasize that. Anyways, so she's been doing a lot of work on this issue with Gavin Newsom and Jennifer Siebel Newsom, the first partner, as she likes to call herself, and we're going to dive right into it. Today, we plan on covering 6 things. Jennifer's been on top of these stories for a long time, and I want to talk about how she first spotted a lot of these financial questions concerning the Newsom family, frankly, years before it's come out in the press because of the new recently revealed by the governor DOJ investigation of him and his partner, all of our first partner. I want to talk about what we know about the probe, which I think we'll find isn't really much right now. I want to talk about the Siebel Newsom nonprofit angle that's going on. I want to talk about shady real estate dealings that have gone on with the Newsoms, the kind of stuff that doesn't happen for you people like you and me, but happens for the people of privilege. I want to talk about Newsom and tax returns. And then lastly, but not least, I wanted to hit on what we as conservatives should or shouldn't be talking about and pushing here so that we're emphasizing the things that are important, but at the same time not spreading misinformation or stuff that doesn't really matter, because our opponents will seek to attack us based on the things we say that we shouldn't be saying when there's plenty for them to be on the defense of. So Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. It's really going to be good to have the time to go through some of the stuff, because some of the little 3-minute interviews, you can't really get into the meat of. It's pretty complex.
Yeah, well, we're going to do as much as we can. We've got Jennifer. I didn't mention it, but Jennifer, when she talks about 3-minute interviews, she's been on a lot of shows lately. I got to hear her lately. She was on the phone with my dear friend, Larry O'Connor. You know, Larry and I were part of Team Breitbart. He worked at Breitbart when I was doing Breitbart had for a brief period of time for a few years. Breitbart had a California vertical. And so I was an editor with that, helping out. And so Larry's a real good buddy, but I know what time he's on the air. So I can only imagine what time you woke up to go on his show. What time did you get up to do that?
I think 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah. And that was at the end of his show. We'll get you on the end of my show. So anyways, all right. So let's talk about the DOJ probe. I could tell you this much, that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Sacramento, based on whistleblower complaints, has supposedly entered into an investigation of the Newsom family finances. What do we know, Jen?
I mean, there's not a lot that we actually know, because the DOJ isn't going to comment on an ongoing investigation publicly. So from different sources, they say that exactly what you said. It started as a whistleblower complaint. Gavin Newsom himself said, in his weird staccato way of reading a teleprompter, that the agents were knocking on the doors of friends and family and asking all kinds of questions, and that different records were being subpoenaed, which I would imagine are bank records, and maybe even the mortgage closing packet. I have his mortgage documents from the public record, but as we all know, there's a huge closing packet that the title companies or lenders put together, and that would have a trove of information that might make some of his real estate things make more sense.
All right. Well, I can tell you this. When I heard Newsom, he gave his little 3-minute monologue or whatever it is, which we'll link below as well so you can hear what he has to say. When I heard it, I literally said to myself, this is what Jen has been working on for years. And he's talking about it like it's made up and it's out of nowhere. So I thought to myself, and by the way, when this all came out, I was on family vacation outside of the lower 48. We went to Hawaii, which was great. But I thought as soon as I get back, I got to get with Jen. I got to get her on the program so we could talk about this. So let's talk about it. Does it make sense to start with the nonprofit angle, or do you want to start with the real estate angle?
We could start with the nonprofit because there's not as much meat with that one. Then we can dive into the meat of the
All right.
rest.
So, folks, you're going to find out about two entities. One of them is called the Representation Project, right? And the other one is
Yes.
what? The California Partners Project? It's
Yes.
not all
So
about
that
dirty diapers.
no.
So, all
Yeah,
right,
the
talk
Partners
to us.
Project that's something that started once she was the first partner, and it's a state. I don't know if I have the proper legal term for it, but it's a nonprofit entity, but it's tied with the state. Also has state funding. It's basically part of the state government, like a quasi governmental thing, which he has had a lot of corporations do millions, tens of millions of dollars of behested payments into. And that's a really nice way of saying that the governor twisted the arms of some big corporations to donate to this. And of course, it's focused on gender equity. The same woman who just slammed trad wives last week is talking about empowering women, but only in the way that she wants that empowered. So then we go to the Representation Project, which also is focused on gender equity. And that group has the license for the misrepresentation, as in MISS representation movie that Jennifer Newsom created through her for-profit company, Girls Club Entertainment. So basically, there's a lot of money that goes to the Partners Project, that goes into the Representation Project, even from companies like AT&T, PG,
Well,
and then the
I think
schools
that's
have to pay to show this film.
I think that's one of the key things that we need to talk about is maybe explain to the uneducated person or the person who only knows the what a behested payment is, right? What is
Yes,
that?
so it's kind of like, when we had the fires, the Palisades fire in Altadena, that Newsom would go to different corporate entities and say, hey, we really need fire relief funds, for this charity. Can you go donate to this? And so they go donate to that. And then it's supposed to be reported like, hey, we made this contribution at the request
The request of this
of the governor. Yeah.
and ne
And
ne
so
and
that,
never
yeah.
and never mind the fact that the people that he calls are heavily regulated by him.
Yes.
So you've got a very it's almost like, it's like the mob boss, right? It's like, "Hey, you wanna keep your business going, right? Well, my guys are around the corner, and, they'd like to come pay you a visit, but as long as you keep paying your tithe, right, we're not gonna bother you." What do you say when your chief regulator calls you up and says
Right.
and then it becomes normal, then it becomes budgeted. Hey, and the dollar amounts are staggering when you consider what the actual limits are that they can give to, say, the Gavin Newsom reelection. Their
Right.
maximum amount that they could give is, I wanna say $40,000, which is still a pretty tidy sum of money, but we're
Right.
talking about behested payments that are 6, maybe 7 figures.
Exactly. And they think that just because it's disclosed that means it's all okay and above board. But we all know that that's not really the case. So I want to correct something that I said about the films with Jennifer Newsom. So
Yes.
it's the Girls Club LLC owns the copyright to that documentary because she made it through that company. But they licensed the film to the Representation Project for 7 years for the purpose of providing distribution rights and public performance rights to screening hosts. So then this movie is shown in school districts. The schools then have to pay this royalty fee or a
Right.
fee to screen the film that then goes to the Representation Project. So she pays herself
So
about
this become
150,000.
so
I'm
this
sorry.
becomes now we're not even talking about behested payments, now we're talking about taxpayer money.
Yes, yes.
So
And then
now
also
taxpayer
some of these
money.
companies donate to the Representation Project too.
Isn't it the case that Newsom or Siebel comes from a really wealthy family? Because I'm like I mean, that's always been the spin. And I'm trying to figure out why is it the people that don't need money grift the system
Hmm.
like this? I just,
So Jennifer Siebel does come from a wealthy family, but not as wealthy as what a lot of people say. They say that she came from the Siebel systems fortune, but that's like a second cousin is the one who has that money. Her dad is not this Tom Siebel that they
interesting.
keep claiming that he is. Her dad is Ken Siebel, who was a wealth manager in Marin County. So obviously still does very well if you're just talking about out of all of the people in America,
Well,
she's
it's just
comes
that
from
it's
definitely wealthy family, but not as wealthy as what they're saying.
so it's just part of this culture of corruption, right? Because you want to know who's really not wealthy, assuming he
Me?
wins? Us, right? The
Right.
next governor of California, Javier Becerra, I don't remember how
Javier
Steve Hilton
Baccaria.
pronounced it. Right, exactly. And so just think about, I mean, you run for governor and they're like, "Don't worry, once you get in there, we will hire your family members. There's a whole system in place. It's gonna be one of those things where everybody wonders how did your net worth go up so much while you were in this public job?" But
Right.
it's again part of the pay for play system, and you can be sure that if Becerra is elected governor, that he will step right into that. If anything, he may become more dependent on it. I mean, it's not
Right.
that this is a not that this is a talk about Becerra's, I guess you'd
Wealth.
call issue, no, or about his issues, potential criminal issues, but the whole idea that he had no idea that his former chief of staff was going to come to work
Right.
for him and money was going to get channeled through a nonprofit, that he didn't know anything about it. No one actually believes that, which is different than being able to prove it. I admit that, but he's already kind of signaled, "I'm here to play the game." Anyways, all right. So
Right.
we can have another conversation, maybe 8
I'll
years
have
of
to
them
come back on. Yeah.
about Becerra. But okay, so now you've got this grift that's going on through the nonprofits. Let's talk about the real estate deals, because to me, this is the most crazy thing. So let's talk
Yes.
about that. Or let's have you talk about that.
So I want to first say that the what indicates to me that there really is something here is I've been reporting on this stuff since 2020 with his first gifted mansion in Sacramento County, and they've never come out with anything to disprove what I'm saying. So if it was a bunch of junk, they would have already shown that by now, I believe. There's been FPPC cases about it. There's been multiple media exposures to this, especially during the recall, and they're not coming out and trying to disprove it. In fact, they got even more quiet and stopped providing his tax returns after I started reporting on this.
Yeah. So let's do this chronologically. When did you first figure out that something was going on?
So in June of 2020, someone contacted me and said they heard that Newsom was moving to
To be clear, 6 years ago.
6 years
They've
ago.
been stonewalling this thing for 6 years, and his allies in the media in California have blown this off for 6 years.
I mean, some of them have
Alright,
reported on things, but we know how Newsom's people get with media who report unfavorably on Newsom.
right.
So I was given a tip that he was moving like to Roseville or somewhere on some big golf course and wanting me to look into some of these rumors. So I pulled up his property profile for this house that they bought in Fair Oaks along the American River, which is kind of a nice ritzy area outside of Sacramento because, the governor's mansion wasn't good enough for them. And noticed that the title had been transferred to them earlier that year out of an LLC and for no consideration. So basically, there was no payment made to purchase it from the LLC. So I thought that's odd and looked and
Right.
said the reason
100%.
was, the reason was because it was transferred out of the LLC to members of the LLC, is what the filing said. And that way they avoided the transfer tax, which would have been about $4,000. So I started digging more and found that right after Gavin was elected governor in November 2018, this LLC was formed, which was, I'm not going to say the name of it because it's a street address of their home. And that LLC purchased this $3.7 million home in a cash transaction. And so, okay, not necessarily anything weird about that, except that they still had a $5.9 million home in Marin County that had a mortgage of 80% of its value, basically. So completely mortgaged out, because generally you're not going to get a refi for more than 80% of the home's
Right, of
value.
course.
And so they already had a mortgage
And
there. They put the
you
home
wanna
on the market.
even rich
Go
people
ahead.
wanna avoid all the extra insurance costs that are associated with not
Right.
having 20% down.
Right. So they still had that mortgage and they had put that home on the market in January of 2019, right when he was taking office. And by June of that year, it hadn't sold, even though they had knocked the price down. So they started renting it out, and they ended up taking a loss on their taxes for that after after they claimed all the different costs for, you know, management, maintenance, all that stuff. So anyway, they go ahead and they have that house. And then about 9 months later, if I'm remembering correctly, let me look at my notes. They transferred it out of the LLC into their names. And then about 6 months after that, they got a $2.7 million cash out refi mortgage on that home. So that was kind of curious because if you have this home, why would you do this unless you need the cash? Maybe they needed the cash to keep making the payments on the other place. Who knows? But the reasoning that they gave was really odd. First, they said that the cash came from their cousin, Jeremy Shearer, who formed this LLC, who is Plump Jack's CFO, and that
That's the
they
governor's
paid him
cousin.
back.
That's the
Yes.
governor's cousin?
Yep.
Okay.
Then they said that it was their cash, but they just formed this LLC for privacy purposes. But why would you do that and then transfer it out of the LLC into your names? That's kind of curious.
Of course
But
it
when they
is.
got that cash out, they didn't even pay the property taxes. That almost went into like a default situation with their property taxes. And how I know that they're reading my work is after I started pointing out their problems paying property taxes online. They are on time. Now they pay them on time. So what was odd to me was when I looked back over, well, another odd thing, there's a lot of odd things with this, looking back over Gavin Newsom's, what we knew of his tax returns and what his Form 700s have said, they wouldn't have had $3.7 million in cash to buy that home. And I don't have answers for a lot of this. I did all the research I could do open source, and I actually met with IRS criminal investigators about this down in
Really?
Santa Ana. Yeah, in 2020.
Not
And
because was that because they were investigating or because you had questions trying to inquire from them? I don't understand what's legit and what's not.
well, it was because I was still trying to find out more about what happened because we still had never found anything. And by that time, he had sold that Marin County mansion, the $5.9 million one. And I was just still trying to find out because when I have unanswered questions, I still try to every few months go back and look at things. So I was talking to a real estate attorney that I knew in Orange County, and they said, "Hey, my friend works for IRS Criminal Investigations. I agree with you." Because I wanted the real estate attorney to look and tell me what am I missing? Where am I wrong? And they said, I can't find where you're wrong. And we can't look at any more documents because we don't have subpoena power. So I have a friend at IRSCI. Why don't you sit down with them? And same thing, I sat down with them and said, what am I missing? Tell me where I'm wrong. There has to be an answer. They also said, we can't figure it out based on what we're seeing. So they're not allowed to talk with me after that. So I
Right.
had heard,
But the
though, that
interesting part, like you said a few minutes ago, is that with this criminal probe that's taking place by the Department of Justice, we have every reason to believe that they would have those they certainly have access to them because they have
they
subpoena
should by
power.
now. Yeah, yeah. But I did hear through the grapevine that Merrick Garland shut down that probe.
Well, I guess he's not around anymore to shut down anything, right? So
Exactly.
by the way, if you're watching this and you're wondering why, when you bought your house, you didn't form an LLC with the name of your house and do all these amazing creative things, I guess you're just not cool like the Newsoms. If it makes you cynical, it's almost like the governor wants to raise everybody's taxes and then maximize every opportunity he has to not pay any of his own, let alone, I assume that the creation of these LLCs allows him to shelter the identity of and cover up money that comes in from the backside, right? It's not like they don't have to disclose everyone who puts money into a private LLC, do they?
I mean, I don't think that they do.
Well,
But
you don't
however,
you couldn't find it, right?
I couldn't find it. But the other thing is this LLC was never listed on his tax returns. He claimed that he didn't have to put it on his Form 700 because it was for his primary residence. So he didn't have to put anything on there. But for it to not be in his tax returns at all was strange. It's now been dissolved. But that was another reason that I was looking back at it in 2023, trying to find out, you have an LLC that's going to purchase something, that money has to be put into the LLC before the LLC then makes a purchase. And then if Gavin's cousin, Jeremy, was a member of it as well, and then that asset was distributed out, wouldn't he be entitled to a percentage of that?
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember we're not talking about 20 years ago, Gavin Newsom. This is all stuff that's going on while he is the sitting governor of California, and he has dubbed his wife to be the first partner. And so, it's pretty shady stuff. So, the minute I saw, what is it, like about a $2.7 million cash out?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of money. So, and again, still no kind of real details. What about can we talk a little bit more about the Marin County property?
Yeah. So that's really where everything really accelerates because they don't have the finances to afford that and the Sacramento home. So back, I think it was 2024, the summer of 2024, they said, oh, they're moving back to Marin County so their kids can start high school there because Gavin's not going to be in Sacramento the whole rest of their childhood, blah, blah, blah. But they said they were just going to stay with family friends there. Well, then in November of 2024, they buy this $9.1 million mansion through an LLC formed by Jennifer Newsom. It was formed about a
I read
week.
this. Hold on a minute. I got to prove that I read your stuff, not just from any firm, but basically from a firm controlled by Daniel Pritzker, right?
Yes.
And if people don't remember who
Yep,
he is, he might be related to the current governor of Illinois,
he is.
which is kind of ironic because that's somebody who may end up running against Newsom for president. So, or
That was
maybe
my
he'll,
thought on that too.
yeah. So, okay. So I didn't mean to get off on a tangent.
No, no, it's a
I'm
good
like a
tangent.
fanboy, and I need to prove to the author on the phone on the podcast that I read all of her stuff.
So that LLC that purchased that home was formed about a week later, which isn't necessarily a huge deal because things happen in real estate where, paperwork crosses and it doesn't all get filed on the same day, whatever. So I'm not going to make a big deal about that. But the LLC purchases this for $9.1 million and there's no mortgage recorded, no encumbrance, anything like that. So going, okay, who fronted this money?
Right. It's not a
People
small amount of
report.
money.
Yes, and one issue I have with a lot of the reporting on their finances that comes out, they say, oh, they bought this home and it has this amount of mortgage on it, but they don't report that the home was purchased in November of 2024, and it wasn't for 3 months that this mortgage was taken out for $6.5 million at 6.75% interest, which is a freaking huge mortgage.
Right.
So no matter how good friends the
I mean,
Pritzkers might
that didn't
be,
happen to you. That didn't happen to you, Jen. It didn't happen to me where somebody sold me a house that, pay us in a few months.
yeah, I'm just going to give you the deed unencumbered to this $9.1 million asset and just, on a, hey, bro, I got you in a few months handshake. I don't think that happens. So the LLC is on the mortgage because that is who owns it on the title. But because it's in the name of an LLC, all of the members of this LLC had to sign a personal guarantee. So that was Jennifer Newsom and her parents, Ken and Judy. So obviously they're on the LLC, no Gavin on this. So that the mortgage
And I
payments.
remember you
Go
also
ahead.
you reported that this mortgage was a full on, because this was 2025 now,
Yeah.
right? So we're talking
Yep.
about like was a 6.75% mortgage. I don't have to get out much of a calculator to figure out that a $6.5 million mortgage with a 6.75% APR is a significantly larger mortgage than you're going to be able to pay on your salary as the governor of California.
Correct. Correct. And that's the issue. Well, it also has a primary residence clause, and the mortgage on the home in Sacramento also has a primary residence clause. But Gavin's only on one of those. So if there's any mortgage fraud with that, he's kind of throwing his wife under the bus
Well,
there.
maybe they have different primary residences, right?
Yeah,
So,
maybe Gavin claims the Sacramento one and she claims the Marin County one. So why this is a problem, that mortgage is about $506,000 a year for just the payments, not including the $120,000 property tax bill for that place. And when you look at what we know of Gavin's income, I've examined 11 tax years of his returns. Some of them only through reporting because I wasn't invited to see them. But the last 4 years that we have, 2017, 18, 19, 20, I've looked at the full returns. Their average income for that whole 11-year span is $1.4 million total income. And they pay about $450,000 a year in total taxes between state, federal, local. They spend about $200,000 a year for household employees, which is huge. All their kids go to private school. I have heard that now that they're in Marin, the younger two go to public school, but the older two go to schools that are like $70,000 a year. Then you have the mortgage on the place in Sacramento, which is about $13,000 a month. And you have the property taxes on that, I think about $50,000 a year. I'm just going by memory there. But then you just also have, what do you think it costs? What is the PG&E bill for like a 6,000 square foot home in Marin County?
right, and then
And then,
add to that all the other utilities and all the other
right,
expenses, and then, oh, yeah, they have to have cars. I go, well, I guess he doesn't have to have a car. Maybe the first lady, since she has a massive staff, also gets, I guess she gets driven around by the CHP too. So we pay the gas.
right, right. But then you also have 4 kids. I know that the older two play a lot of sports and the traveling team sports, which we know are expensive. and 4 kids eat a lot of food. There's clothing, all of that stuff. So even without going into a lot of just the things like, okay, your Netflix, your all your other utilities at home, we're going up close to $2 million in expenses that we know they have on a $1.4 million income. Now, we don't have the 5 years of tax return. We don't have 2021, 2, 3, 4, 5, because they just are not producing them. We do have their Form 700s, which doesn't show a large increase. Of course, those are big ranges in there. It does show they sold some wine in 2025 to a collector in Marin County. But we know that the wine industry, I think about 85 to 90% of his assets are tied up in the wine industry, because Plump Jack does have some hotels, but it's mostly wine. And the wine industry has not done well since 2020. So it's hard to think that he has a significant increase in his income there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just disconcerting. And of course, his cousin, who's part of the LLC and all of that, he doesn't have any public reporting requirements on anything he receives and any gifts that he gets. And the whole thing, this is the problem. When somebody refuses to be transparent about what they're doing, it causes you to just kind of presume that they're not being transparent because they don't want you to see what's going on, because it's not savory, it's not kosher. And I think that the governor is misunderstanding the level of scrutiny that a front-runner candidate for the Democratic nomination for president is going to be under. And I think that all of this is going to be under a microscope. And long before it's a microscope that's being caused because of arrows being slung from the Republican side, it's going to be all of these Democrats who want to be in the White House that are not Gavin Newsom. And I wonder how many times we got to mention Pritzker and alone before Pritzker says, "Hey, look into this, because I don't want to be part of any issues
Right.
there."
Right, which is partly what
So,
I
all
think
right.
happened
So,
with the Dana Williamson thing. I think Becerra got wind of, Politico told him, hey, all this money's being drained from your campaign account. And Becerra decided he didn't want to be part of it. But anyway, back to the Marin County mansion. My
yes,
theory on their down payment for that. So they did sell the other Marin County mansion in 2021. Yeah. To a Winston Chan, who is Andy Dong's criminal attorney up in the Bay Area.
this is the guy
And the
from
whole
Oakland.
yes, yes,
The one where somehow the governor's appointed attorney general Bonta is tied up with that guy, and we know
yes,
that that manifested about $500,000 of legal fees on Bonta's campaign report to Wilson Sonsini Goodrich Rosati, which has this vibrant white collar criminal defense practice, right?
right,
So they're all mobbed up. It's
yes. And so this Winston Chan is
and
another,
so, by the
he's
way,
on
to
that
be
same
clear,
level.
this is the same Bonta who, as the state's top prosecutor, would have the primary responsibility, based on all of this going on, to be looking into what's happening with the governor and his finances. Because if there's potential violations of the law, that's the job of the state's top law enforcement officer.
But his
So
name's not Trump, so Bonta's not interested.
that's
So I believe they, based on my calculations of what they would have had remaining on that mortgage in Marin County when they sold it and what the sales price was, they would have cleared about $2 million from that sale. So I'm assuming that that's what ended up eventually being rolled into this Marin County purchase. But it still doesn't explain how they could even get that mortgage. The mortgage brokers I've spoken to and who have the rate sheets for this Axos Bank at the time that this mortgage happened, and the underwriting guidelines said that they don't think that they should have qualified for that. But so let's say, for argument's sake, that Newsom took that $2 million and they did a lot of investing in 2021 and they made some money on that. Well, there should have been an entry on his Form 700s of these new acquisitions of mutual funds or whatever they would have put it in. And there
right. The
are no
primary
new
purpose.
investments on there.
Right. That the primary purpose of that Form 700 is to make the public aware of potential conflicts,
Right. Right.
right?
So, if that was the case, it should have shown up there. Then we have people saying, well, just he could have just borrowed against his assets. Well, no, because when he took office, he placed all of his assets in a blind trust, a very hardcore blind trust, I guess you'd say, because to comply with California ethical requirements, he has to have no contact with any of that. And even if the trustee sells some of it, they have to reinvest that into the blind trust. They can't just distribute it to
Do they
him.
identify do they identify the trustee of a blind trust, or is that also blind to
They
us?
do, and that's another interesting thing. Shyla Hendrickson. Does the name Hendrickson ring a bell with you for anything related to Newsom? His
Well,
partner on the
refresh everybody who's
podcast?
watching.
Yes, his partner on his Politickin' podcast is Doug Hendrickson, one of his longtime good friends who's a sports agent who is the husband of Shyla Hendrickson.
So it's all kind of, well, I mean, I want to
I
cut
mean,
him a little bit of
I'm not
slack.
gonna accuse her of anything, but
Yeah,
it
well,
just
I
doesn't
mean,
inspire confidence when it's your best friend's wife, and we know his history with best friends' wives.
yeah, because I'm sure there is no instance where you get together with your best friend and his wife and they don't tell you about what's going on in your blind trust, right? They don't
Yeah,
get your input, Blue Horseshoe loves Endicott Steel, right? Or whatever code they want to give to.
exactly. I mean, I would hope that that doesn't happen, but I learned long ago that I'm naive when it comes to my hopes of the ethics of my elected leaders.
Yeah, well, so let's talk about Newsom's recent, I don't know what you want to say, going on offense about this whole affair. I mean, it's kind of funny because, he's objecting to the fact that the feds are now reaching out to his friends and contacts, which probably would include the Hendricksons, right?
Pretty
Now that
sure
you
there are ones
mention it,
that had
right?
their door knocked on. Yeah,
And and
pretty sure about
and then
that.
you sit around and you go, okay. And by the way, this is me theorizing, right?
Right.
This is
Spitballing.
not me. I don't know anything, but you sit around and let's presume for a moment that there's a lot of shifty stuff going on, and there's not just smoke, but there's fire. And so you say to yourself, if you're Gavin Newsom and the first lady or the first partner, you say, well, of course we're going to get indicted because the feds are unfair, right? We have explanations for all of this, but they're going to indict us. And so if you go under the theory that there's going to be an indictment, then suddenly maybe his statement to the public that he made last week doesn't look all that far-fetched because he's trying to
Right.
throw I mean, he's basically trying to make the case that, of course, the Trump Department of Justice is going to come after me because of who I am politically, not because of the underlying facts. Never mind the fact that the Trump Justice Department has to demonstrate to a judge the veracity of the facts. Never mind the fact that this investigation was first started by the Department of Justice when Joe Biden was president of the United States, which happened sometime after it was started by Jen Van Laar of RedState, but that's another story. I'm just going to tell you right now, nothing makes me more annoyed than, I get it if you're somebody who hasn't been plugged into politics and you're like, oh my God, all of this is new. There is not one reporter covering California politics who can, with a straight face, go, here's all these new allegations. The political ecosystem in California is not large enough for any reasonable reporter who covers Gavin Newsom to have not seen and read everything that you have
Yeah.
written. And they want to, oh my, this is all new. Gosh. But
Right. Right.
so
Yes.
the good news is I don't think any of this preening by the governor is going to cause the DOJ to not do a thorough job. And if they find that there's probable cause that the Newsom family has violated the law, I would expect them to move forward. And by the way, wouldn't you think, Jennifer, that if somebody's the sitting governor of California, as you sit around and potentially are scheming all of these things, wouldn't you kind of say to yourself, well, this isn't a very good idea because there's going to be an awful lot of scrutiny on me because I'm the governor of the largest state in America.
Well, 2 points on that. First, I want to say Gavin brought up the grand jury process in his statement. And so that kind of takes it a little bit out of the realm of just being a political persecution, prosecution, whatever, because that grand jury, you're not going to get all those people on that grand jury to agree to have subpoenas issued, that kind of thing, without there being something there. But Gavin, if you look back, he's gotten away with so much throughout his career. Like people joke about Trump being able to still get elected despite all these kinds of things. But Gavin had that affair with his best friend's wife in San Francisco. He failed on so many things, so many promises as mayor of San Francisco, still kept getting reelected, got elected lieutenant governor, beat the recall, then won handily again 2022 as governor.
Not only did he beat the recall, he used the recall to raise vastly more money than he needed to defeat the recall and has used it for his political gain, just like with Prop 50. He raised tens
That's
of
what I
millions
was
of
just
dollars
going to
more
bring
than they
up.
spent.
Yes, and not just that, with Prop 50, they went against the California Constitution to get that on the ballot and passed.
Of
And he
course.
got away with it. and not only
I
got it on the
actually
ballot,
think
but
that
got it passed.
I actually think, and this is part of why I say I don't know that he's prepared for the national scrutiny that he's going to get, because I do think it's the case here in California that with one political party running the legislative branch, the governors, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and then
Hmm.
frankly, I mean, just look at the number of former media reporters who work for Newsom, who work in the legislature. I mean,
Right.
these people, most of the reporters, I'm not going to say all of them, but most of the reporters are liberal, and there's some reporters who are liberal who still take their job seriously, but we do not. You can tell by the absence of true watchdog journalism. I mean, you've got the Ashley Zavalas and others out there in the mainstream media who are doing a great job, but overwhelmingly, the media is not covering this stuff. And so,
Right.
if you're Gavin Newsom, at some point you start to believe, well, I'm freaking bulletproof. Like,
Yeah.
no matter what I do, nobody cares. And if you see that and you experience that long enough, you start to just kind of go, well, I can do whatever I want. And maybe
Yeah.
the frustration that they're about to experience is you can't do whatever you're not, certainly not without public scrutiny. And so,
Right. And I got to give
it's
a
really
shout
my
out to
hope, Jennifer.
Alexi Kosef at Cal Matters.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
been asking for the tax returns. He's also brought up that Gavin really doesn't ever publish his schedule.
So
At
Alexi's now
RedState,
what?
we get an
I think he's
email
with
every day. He's with
I
Cal
think
Matters
Alexi's
now.
with, I think isn't he with the Washington Post now?
He might have gone there. I might have missed something
Which, by the way,
in being
tells you
busy.
something when the Washington Post brings in a reporter who knows Gavin Newsom more intimately than most. That makes me
Yes.
optimistic, because
Yes.
that also should worry the first family that he's there, and
Right.
obviously the post is always needing to make sure that they can cover the presidential race. So I would say
Right.
this, because as we're chalking under 40 minutes of this, which is frankly, I could talk to you about this for 3 hours and we would not exhaust content. But what would you say, like, maybe I should ask it this way: if you could put one document in front of every California political reporter tomorrow to say, look at this and answer the questions that come from this, what would it be? Well, I guess it would be
I think
your
it would.
reporting.
I was going to say, I think it would have to be one of my stories going over their income and everything, because these reporters know about the blind trust. They know about all of the things that hamstring Gavin from being able to do the things that most wealthy people can do to have creative financing, and just ask them to explain it.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. So, I mean, there's nothing that obviously keeps Gavin Newsom from clearing all of this up whenever he wants, because obviously any confidentiality, any discreetness is all on him. So he's able to disclose, but he doesn't. So my challenge to every reporter out there is, whenever you're with the governor, your first question should be, why aren't you making all of this information disclosable out there? You're saying there's a witch hunt. We're investigators. We're reporters. We're not with the Trump administration. Give us what we need to clear your name, right? Give us what we need to
Right.
demonstrate that there's nothing wrong. If you don't want to give it to that Jennifer Van Laar woman who didn't vote for you, okay, we get that. But I'm with the LA Times, or I'm with the Sacramento Bee, or I'm with Cal Matters. Give us a sit down, give us all the documents we ask for, and let us clear your name. But that doesn't really happen. What should people be looking for next, do you think? Is all eyes on the DOJ now?
Well, Newsom said that they're preparing to release the rest of his tax returns, that he promised when he was on the campaign trail, he would release full tax returns every year and all of his business interests. He thinks just by these ranges on the Form 700, he's disclosing all of his business interests. But I don't see, if he's been filing his taxes all along, why you can't just, redact their social security numbers and address or whatever off of that and just upload them. It shouldn't take very long at all.
Yeah, it really shouldn't. So, Jen, as when his tax returns come out, we'll be looking at it. I'll be looking at your coverage. And then when we think that another shoe has dropped on this, I would love to have you come back and talk with us, and we'll get more into it. And then I don't want to keep going too long, because I want to make sure this is something that's it's substantial enough that it really helps, like I said, get past the 3 minute or the 4 minute interview. But at the same time, like I said, we could do 2 hours on this easily. Although,
Yeah.
little secret to everybody, as we tape this, Jen's getting ready to go on the Scott Jennings show. Scott's a good friend of mine for a long time, and by the way, he's not going to give you 45 minutes on his show.
No,
Maybe.
he's not.
I don't think he is. But and so for those of you that are watching, if you look below, you'll see that we've linked Jen's stories. Now, are these all behind a paywall, or are these available for
Nope,
people
they're
to
all
see?
available for everyone. But
All
I would
right.
love
So
for
I would
them
say two things.
to
One,
become a Red State VIP and support us, because you know how long it takes to go through all these kind of records and things like that.
uh,
So
I,
for
I
me
was
to have
I
that
was
time to
gonna
do that, we need subscribers.
I was going to say that. So I would encourage everybody to do that. I would encourage you to read these materials. And then, the best way, as far as I'm concerned now, to make sure that people know what's going on is to share this interview. It'll share, when you do that, it also shares all the links, and it allows people that want to understand what's going on to start to get a picture of what's going on. But I would tell you this, you know how they always talk about with the iceberg, only 15% is above the water and the rest is underneath. This interview with you, Jen, is the 15%, but all of the stuff you've worked on, the information you've accumulated, the documentation that you've pulled together, that's the 85%. So if you're watching this podcast and you really want to know more about this, click on the links below. As a matter of fact, the first link below, Jen's created kind of a start here, and that's where you want to go, because from there, you can look at all the different work that she's done. Jen, this is a free promo. You don't owe me lunch, but
Thank you.
I told Jen, and I'm going to conclude with this, that I really wanted to talk to her because Red State and Jen have been kind of the reporters of record on this topic. And there's no way that Gavin Newsom should be able to get away with all this stuff is coming out of nowhere. Gavin has known that it's coming out of nowhere. What's coming out of nowhere for Gavin Newsom, kind of a final point, is that people are now looking into it that he doesn't control. He doesn't regulate them. He doesn't ideologically stimulate them. He is now looking at people that are saying, what should we have in the White House? And I think the thing that Gavin Newsom will find the most disturbing is there isn't a day of the week that he doesn't wake up, he and his comms team, and spend time attacking Donald Trump for representations of ethical, moral, not having proper ethical and moral standards. And I think that he has set himself up, based on how this goes, to be the world's biggest hypocrite. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think it's very, very possible that, sooner than later, all these lists that say who's the likely front runner for president are no longer going to have Gavin Newsom on them. I think this thing is going to blow up and it's going to pull him down. And he's going to find out that when he's not the governor anymore, no one's going to care about him other than federal investigators. So with that, Jen, thanks for everything that you're doing. I really appreciate it. Obviously, I enjoy your friendship, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for you as a professional and the work that you do.
Thank you.
And we'll just keep in touch.
Thank you.